I'm the Rubber Von Ducker, and just to warn you, this video is going to be mainly audio. I will be putting in a few pictures, but in the UK we've got a snowstorm coming in, and whenever we have snow, my internet tends to play up because it was put in place by the Edison company before, well, I think it might even be before World War One, so it's not very reliable. And this video is for those looking for the two birds, and it's interesting to mention at this point, it does seem like the Red Dead community is split into two groups, those who are seeking the birds and those who have gone to Window Rock. And I do not think that's an accident at all, but we'll get there. In order to explain the two birds, I'm going to have to tell you a bit of a story, and that means going back to my favourite place in the world, Elysian Pool. And as we've discussed previously, there's the mural, but unlike Window Rock, the mural's on two sides. So effectively, it's representing two different cultures. On the one side, you've got the buffalo and all the murals there. That represents Native Americans. On the other side, you've got a mural with horses and lots of different animals. I don't think it's got any buffalo. And that represents the European settlers. European settlers brought horses and cattle into America. They also hunted for furs and generally initially made a living hunting. Now, I'm not going to focus too heavily on the European side of a wall, but I'm going to discuss specifically two things on the Native American side. The first being the tree with the dream catchers. Now, the main thing about that is the dream catchers, and the web relates to a spirit guardian of the Native American people, specifically the Ojibwe tribe, who are the tribe who first came up with Dreamcatcher. It was later adopted by other tribes. Now, obviously, early in the existence of a tribe, things were very difficult and harsh, as they were for all early civilizations. And so the Spider Woman, presumably feeling sympathy for their plight, used to weave protection charms and ceremonies for the infants being born to help protect them. Worked, the tribe spread out, and as the tribe spread out, they struggled to be able to get back to where the Spider Woman was in order to take part in the ceremony. So the mothers of the tribe decided that they would themselves weave their own protections, imitating the Spider Woman, and that's how we got the Dreamcatcher. The other mural to look at in this section is literally just below the tree with dream catchers, and I haven't shown it in any of my videos. I did notice it probably just after the video where I said that it's going to end at the caves, and it's first appearance of the two birds. Now, I don't know if we'll find any others in the next two trails. We haven't yet, and I suspect not. Now, the two birds represent the Native Americans, which are represented by the Thunderbird, and a harpy, or at least I presume it's a harpy, representing the European settlers. I do wonder why they've picked the harpy, although it kind of makes sense. The harpy was a Greek invention, and Greeks are the ones who have said to be the bedrock of not just European civilization, but Western civilization. It makes sense that they'd pick a Greek icon. But the harpy has limited stories about it. The main one I can think of is that they were sent down to punish the king of Thrace, I believe it was. I can't remember what his transgression was, but the gods punished him by imprisoning him and putting harpies effectively to guard him, but also to torment him. And that's why I think they've picked the harpy, because it's a symbol of torment, whereas the Thunderbird is a symbol of protection. So this picture we're seeing here is effectively showing the harpy coming in and what would appear to be destroying the Thunderbird, destroying the protection of the Native Americans, which is pretty apt given what we know today. And that's effectively the main story that's in that cave. Now we go down to Butcher's Creek, and there's literally nothing there that says Native American. But when you look at Butcher's Creek, for one, it reminds me of Virginia. Don't ask me why, I just get that feeling. But also, many of the issues in Butcher's Creek can very easily be equated to what happened to the Native American. You've got illness, you've got poisoning, you've got someone trying to buy land for cheap from them, misleading them. All of these are things that happened in Native American culture when the Europeans arrived. Interestingly, you've also got the pagan symbol. Now, that's not something I believe that appears in any Native American tribe. It's not related to, but it's a very good symbol to implicate pagan religion. We've all seen it on album covers. And that, I suspect, is to indicate that they have built over the old sacred sites of the Native American. Now, usually that would happen with the Catholic Church. They'd come in, find a religious site and build a church on it. But the European settlers in North America were predominantly from England, Germany, places like that. And they'd gone to a Protestant religion rather than a Catholic. The Catholic influence did come into America, but in South America through the Spanish, maybe a bit with the French in Louisiana. Butcher's Creek also seems to be land that is not as abundant. It seems to have been drained. And that was another issue for the Native Americans. When English settlers came along, they started growing tobacco and products to ship home. That weakened the soil, so they needed more land, and they'd just encroach on the Native Americans' territory. Now, obviously, this isn't something that you'd necessarily want to put into a game, given the sensitivity towards such issues in the modern day. So I believe the implication is there, but you have to make the connection. And that brings us to the fort. In the fort there is a pile of skulls, and there's also a letter, and the letter is effectively detailing a massacre or an atrocity that is meant to have occurred within the Civil War. Interestingly though, it states that the person is to be executed and burnt, not for their head to be cut off and stacked. So I'm wondering if the stack of skulls actually alludes to something else. Also, there wasn't many atrocities like that in the Civil War. Most of the Civil War was to some degree more civil than most wars that went before it, which seems a strange thing to say. But the fact that brother was fighting brother, family against family, did seem to indicate there wasn't as much anger and hatred to drive such things. And it's also interesting that it's the Confederates attacking the fort. Many tribes of the Native Americans fought with the Confederates during the Civil War, mainly for their own political needs. In fact, most of the massacres that are said to have happened during the Civil War have a connection to Native Americans, whether it's Apache attacks or whether it's attacks on Native American tribes themselves that are related to the Confederacy. But again, this isn't stated. If you didn't know that to be the case, you wouldn't know. Which seems a very good analogy for the destruction of their culture, of their history. And that brings us to the spider webs. And I wonder if I do have everything here, whether there's something we're missing. But the spider webs are on telegraph poles. And the telegraph poles are next to railway lines, and that's how it was in the early days of a railroad. The telegraph poles were initially put in so that stations could send messages towards each other to tell them the train's on the way, or if there's any issues. It also became a very useful tool during the Native American Indian Wars for advising of attacks and movements of different tribes, and that's why you see the telegraph machine in so many of the locations that we're going to. Initially, I didn't understand what the webs were meant to signify, but given that the telegraph pole is a means of communication, my suspicion is that it's a representation of smoke signals, a system of communication used by Native Americans. So that's why I think there's webs. Now, it's worth mentioning at this point, I am British, so my knowledge of American history is very limited. When you go to school in Britain, you're taught literally about America up till the Revolution, and then it stops. And then you might get a little cameo reference in the First World War, and then suddenly we're talking about America again with the Great Depression leading into the Second World War. Fort Wallace. Now, unfortunately, I haven't gone in there yet myself. I need to take some time off after this video and actually play some Red Dead Redemption. But I thought I'd do this video before I do that so that you guys can actually move forward. Now the fort's interesting. We get there by a guitar, and the main clue forward is a guitar, whether you follow the one to window rock directly or whether you follow the one that leads on to the clue of the two birds. And I think this was planned by Rockstar. The whole point was to split the community effectively, and I wouldn't be surprised if they haven't in some way manipulated this, but effectively we have one group now who I'd probably say is led by YouTubers like Darth Myth Hunter. They followed the one guitar and got to window rock, what I will call the soloists. And then you've got another group, I'd say probably if you would say they were led by anyone, it would be the strange man who followed both guitars up to the two birds, the duets. And you've been looking for two birds. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the two sides of this story are represented by two different birds. So what you're looking for is the one at Window Rock and the one in the cave, the harpy statue, which I've been harping on about for way too long. So effectively, I think Rockstar here were purposely splitting the fan base into two different groups, and that was to signify the split, I presume the split between the Native Americans and the Western settlers. So effectively, the Native Americans were moved west and the European settlers kept moving west, but they were in the east. So you've got this split. And the fact that I have seen people getting frustrated on both of these websites with the lack of progress over the last week when I came into this situation, I think that was purposely done to some extent to illustrate the dissatisfaction in both groups during this story. They've basically played us to play the parts of the Native Americans and the European settlers. I think they've done it very well. I think it was a genius move. I really do like it. Although it has to be said, although some people are frustrated, it hasn't degenerated into the kind of mess you see in some debates on other communities on YouTube. So I think we've done relatively well to that effect. So yes, the answer to the two birds is the two birds that I've already mentioned. We're both basically looking for the same thing, just going through different paths. And so that brings us to Window Rock. And I now am pretty certain that the big centerpiece is a dream catcher with a Thunderbird in the middle. And the significance of that is related to the Ho Chunk tradition that states that a man who has a vision of a Thunderbird during a solitary fast will become the war chief of his people. So the implication there is war, and that may explain why there's archers and other symbols that you may relate to war on the mural. And that finally brings us to where we're stuck, the cave. Now, I'm not too sure what the cave means. One thing I will mention is I did have an interesting comment, I'm not sure on which video now, that suggested I take Charles to the cave and let the statues sing. Now, when I initially got it, I hadn't made this connection, so it seemed a bizarre thing to say. But obviously, once I made the connection, I suddenly thought, oh, that is really interesting. The only problem is, I can't get Charles to go. The reason being is I'm still stuck in chapter 2. So I'm telling you, so you can go and find out for yourselves. I'll get there myself eventually, and that's probably what I'll be doing in the next few days. But that's effectively most of the story so far. So since recording that, I've been back to the cave, and I noticed what other people had said in the comments was that the mysterious hill house does lead us to the cave. I think the cave is connected to the Chelonians, only the Chelonians are no longer the organisation that they used to be. They've become corrupted, differentiated away from what they should be doing. I think the cave may belong to an old secret society that is embroiled with a battle with an entity. Now, if you don't want to know what I think is coming, and don't forget I've got a terrible track record, but if you don't want to know what's ahead of us, or what I believe to be ahead of us, click away now, go do something else. Equally, if you do stay and you do want to hear it, just keep it quiet to yourself. Some people won't want to hear it, some will. Equally, if you know someone who wants to, ask them if they want to know, and then point them in the direction of this video or tell them. But yeah, let's try and make sure everyone can get what they want. It'd be a terrible shame if it gets plastered everywhere and you don't get a choice. So here's what I'm thinking. The Native Americans have been extremely wrong, pretty much almost wiped out. Yet there's someone missing from this conversation. Remember the Spider Woman? I'm guessing she's pretty pissed. So I think we're going up there to complete the mission that the secret society had. But in order to complete the mission, going to have to craft a special weapon. Now, in some of my other videos, I've speculated that we need 8 for the ancient burial ground. But after having seen this comment, I have now changed my mind. We don't need 8 arrows. I think we only need 1. As you can see, the Salty Spadwin suggested that we picked up an arrowhead after the Dreamcatcher mission. We've also seen 8 feathers. What we're missing, and how can I put this politely? We're missing wood. We need a shaft. And I think that's the item we're missing. I suspect if we complete the clues and go beyond the cave, either we'll run into her and die, or she won't spawn. So at this point, I think we need to look at where we haven't picked something up, and I think that would be Blackwater Creek. Got the hatchet from the Elysium Cave. We're going to get the feathers from New Hanover. And I think that comment about taking Charles to the cave will probably lead to him offering to construct the arrow. I don't think we'll be able to construct it, or information that leads us to where we can get the arrow crafted. Probably, I hope, he might confirm some of this information as well. So that's what I think the current situation is. Like I say, remember my track record. Now, I know that may upset some people who are hoping for a Black Widow, but I'm guessing you won't be upset. I've a funny feeling that she is going to be in the shape of a Black Widow, a massive Black Widow. I know when people have suggested it, I've said, well, that kind of seems crazy because a Black Widow is very small, but I think this will be some kind of end-of-level boss. In fact, I think I know where the end-of-level boss is. The only question is, have we got more to go? And I don't think we have, because if we got the arrow in the cave, we're getting the feathers from New Hanover. That only leaves two possibilities as to where we're going to find the shaft. It's either going to be Blackwater Creek or going to be the fort. Now, this is all presuming that we've gone to the right location, but with the information that the two birds are the two opposing birds, it seems highly likely that after this we may well be facing the Spider Woman. So on that note, be seeing you.